The Stoicism for Modern Life Blueprint. Harness Stoic philosophy for mental toughness, stress management, anxiety relief, and unshakable emotional resilience by Alexander Reid. Introduction. High above the Mediterranean Sea, the water is a deep, dark blue, stretching out until it meets the sky in a blurry line. In the year 300 BC, a single wooden ship moves slowly across these waves. It is heavy with cargo, sitting low in the water. Inside the hull are hundreds of jars filled with a thick, smelly liquid known as Tyrian purple. This dye is made from thousands of tiny sea snails, and it is worth more than gold. Only kings and queens wear this color. The man who owns this ship, a merchant named Zeno, knows that if he reaches the port in Greece, his life will be set. He will be one of the richest men in the world. He has risked everything he owns on this one trip. Suddenly, the sky turns the color of a bruised plum. The wind begins to howl, whipping the tops of the waves into white foam. The wooden planks of the ship groan under the pressure. The sailors scream to one another, trying to toss heavy items overboard to keep the boat afloat, but it is too late. A massive wave crashes over the side, snapping the mast like a dry twig. In a matter of minutes, the ship splits open. The precious purple dye pours out, staining the dark sea a royal color for just a moment before it disappears into the depths. Zeno is tossed into the freezing water. He grabs onto a piece of floating wood, watching as his entire life's work sinks to the bottom of the ocean. When Zeno finally washes up on the shores of Athens, he has nothing. He has no money, no food, and no friends. He is a stranger in a foreign city, wearing rags and smelling of salt. Most people in his shoes would have curled up in a ball and given up. They would have spent the rest of their lives complaining about the unfairness of the storm or the cruelty of the gods. Instead, Zeno walked into a small bookstore. He sat down and began to listen to a man reading about great thinkers who came before him. He realized that while the ocean could take his ship and his money, it could not take his mind. It could not take his character. A few years later, Zeno began teaching a new way of living on a decorated porch called the Stoa. This was the birth of Stoicism. Zeno would later say that he made his most successful voyage the day he suffered a shipwreck. He lost his wealth, but he found a way to be unshakable. The storm inside the mind most of us will never lose a ship full of purple dye in the middle of the sea. Our shipwrecks look a little different. They arrive in the form of a 2:00 a.m. email from a boss who is unhappy with a project. They show up as a notification on a phone that makes our hearts race. They appear when a family member says something hurtful, or when we look at our bank account and feel a cold knot of fear in our stomachs. We live in a world that is moving faster than ever before. We are constantly told that we need to do more, be more, and have more. We carry the entire world's problems in our pockets, checking the news and social media until our brains feel like they are buzzing with static. This constant, mental chatter makes it hard to focus. It makes us tired before the day has even really started. Many of us feel like we are living on a hamster wheel. We work hard to get a promotion, thinking it will finally make us happy. We buy a new car or a bigger house, hoping it will make us feel successful. But the feeling never lasts. As soon as we reach one goal, we are already worried about the next one. We feel thin-skinned, as if any small comment or unexpected change could ruin our entire week. This is a heavy way to live. It leads to burnout, constant stress, and a feeling that we are never quite enough. We become slaves to our moods. If things go well at work, we are happy. If a colleague is rude to us, our whole day is ruined. We are like small boats being tossed around by the waves, with no rudder to guide us. We crave a sense of calm. We want to be able to walk into a high-pressure meeting without our hands shaking. We want to be able to come home to our families and actually be present, instead of thinking about a spreadsheet or a snarky comment from a neighbor. We want to feel unshakable, no matter what the economy or the world throws at us. The Promise of the Inner Citadel. This book is about building a mental fortress. The ancient Stoics called this the inner citadel. Imagine a strong stone castle sitting on top of a high hill. The wind might howl, and enemies might gather at the gates, but inside the walls, it is safe and quiet. The people inside are not worried because they know the walls are thick and the foundation is solid. By the time you finish these pages, you will know how to build your own inner citadel. You will move from being a reactive person who is easily upset to a proactive leader who stays calm in a crisis. You will learn how to quiet the constant noise in your head so you can make clear decisions. Stop letting other people's bad moods dictate how you feel. Manage the what-ifs that keep you awake at night. Find a sense of purpose that doesn't depend on your job title or your bank account. Handle high-stakes situations without burning out. This isn't about becoming a cold person who has no feelings. It is the opposite. It is about having such a strong grip on your mind that you can experience life fully without being destroyed by it. It is about learning to see things exactly as they are, without the added layer of drama that our brains like to create. This system has worked for over 2,000 years. It worked for Roman emperors who had to lead through plagues and wars. It worked for slaves who had no control over their physical bodies, but found total freedom in their thoughts. It has worked for modern fighter pilots, top athletes, and world leaders. The tools you are about to learn are not just good ideas. They are practical exercises. They are a blueprint for a different way of existing in the modern world. The view from the glass office to see how this works in real life, we need to look at someone who is right in the middle of the storm. In a high-rise office building in the middle of Chicago, Marcus Reid is staring at a computer screen. It is 6:30 p.m., but the office is still humming with the sound of servers and clicking keyboards. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city lights are starting to twinkle, and the L train rattles by on the tracks below. Marcus is 38 years old. He is a senior project manager at a fintech company called Nexus Finance. On paper, he is very successful. He has a beautiful wife named Sarah and 2 toddlers, Leo and Maya, who are waiting for him at home. He has a nice house and a career that many people would envy. But inside, Marcus feels like he is treading water in the middle of the ocean, and his legs are getting tired. Right now, his heart is pounding. A major software launch he has been managing for 6 months just hit a massive glitch. His inbox is filling up with angry messages. The vice president of the company just sent a short, cold email that said, "My office, first thing tomorrow." Marcus feels a familiar wave of panic. His palms are sweaty, and his chest feels tight. He is convinced that this one mistake will lead to him losing his job. He imagines the bank taking his house. He imagines Sarah's disappointed face. He feels like an imposter, waiting for everyone to finally realize he doesn't know what he's doing. He catches his reflection in the dark glass of the window. He looks tired. His shoulders are hunched. He realizes that he has become a slave to a glowing screen and the opinions of people he doesn't even particularly like. He is a people pleaser who is so afraid of making a mistake that he has forgotten how to actually live. Marcus is at a breaking point. He knows he can't keep living like this. He needs a way to find his footing before he sinks. He needs a blueprint for a new way of thinking. Over the next several chapters, we will follow Marcus as he discovers the same tools that Zeno found on the shores of Athens. We will see him try these ancient techniques in the boardrooms and subways of the 21st century. The roadmap ahead, the journey from a reactive life to a resilient one, is not a mystery. It follows a specific path. We are going to walk that path together, step by step. We will begin by learning how to see the world clearly. Most of our stress doesn't come from what happens to us, but from the stories we tell ourselves about what happens. We will look at how a Roman emperor used a simple mental trick to stay calm while leading an empire through a disaster. Next, we will tackle the most important rule of mental toughness, knowing what you can control and what you can't. This sounds simple, but when you actually apply it to your life, it feels like a superpower. You will see how an ancient teacher who was born into slavery used this rule to become freer than the people who owned him. We will then build the 3 pillars of your mental fortress. You will learn how to prepare for challenges before they happen so they don't have the power to knock you down. We will explore why our brains love to imagine the worst-case scenario and how to turn that habit into a tool for strength instead of a source of anxiety. As we move forward, we will look at how to handle real-world crises, the kind that affect your job, your money, and your family. We will see how to build a daily routine that keeps you grounded, even when the world feels like it is falling apart. We will even look at how to handle wealth and success without letting those things own you. Finally, we will talk about the most difficult part of being human, our relationships with others and our relationship with time. You will learn how to deal with difficult people without losing your cool and how to live with a sense of urgency and beauty every single day. This book is not a lecture. It is a guide. It is a set of instructions for a craft, the craft of living well. Stoicism is not something you just read about. It is something you do. Let's begin. Chapter 1, Mastering the Art of Inner Peace. Professor Elias Thorne was the kind of man who could look at a car crash and see a physics lesson instead of a tragedy. He was my first real teacher in the art of staying calm. He didn't teach out of a fancy book in a quiet library. Instead, he taught in a drafty old gym on the edge of town, where the air always smelled like old leather and sweat. He was a boxing coach, but he rarely talked about hitting people. He talked about the lens. One afternoon, a younger student lost his temper during a practice match. The boy was swinging wildly, his face red with fury because he had been tapped on the nose. Thorne blew his whistle, stopped the clock, and pulled the boy aside. He didn't yell. He just pointed to a large, dusty window at the top of the gym. Through the glass, we could see a dark storm rolling in over the city. Thorne asked the boy what he saw. The boy snapped back that he saw a rotten, miserable day that was going to ruin his walk home. Thorne shook his head. He told us that the clouds were just water and wind. The rotten and miserable part didn't belong to the clouds. It belonged to the boy. He told us that the world gives us facts, but we are the ones who turn those facts into stories. If you want to be a master of yourself, you have to learn to see the facts before the story starts. That was the day I realized that peace isn't something that happens to you. It is something you build by changing how you describe the world to yourself. The emperor in the mud. Long before Thorne's gym, there was a man who lived in a very different kind of storm. It was the year 170 AD. The place was the Danubian frontier, a cold, wet, and dangerous edge of the Roman Empire. The man was Marcus Aurelius. On paper, he was the most powerful person on the planet. He was the emperor of Rome. He had millions of subjects, endless gold, and armies that could level cities. But if you looked inside his tent at night, you wouldn't see a man enjoying his power. You would see a tired, aging man shivering in the cold, surrounded by the smell of damp wool and campfire smoke. Marcus was not at peace because his life was easy. In fact, his life was a nightmare. He was fighting a war that seemed like it would never end. His generals were plotting against him. A terrible plague was sweeping through his lands, killing his people by the thousands. He had lost many of his children to illness. Most people in his position would have spent their nights screaming at the gods or drinking themselves into a stupor. Instead, Marcus Aurelius picked up a pen. He wrote a series of private notes to himself. He never intended for anyone else to read them. These notes, which we now call meditations, were his way of practicing what Thorne called the lens. Marcus knew that if he let his mind focus on how terrible the war was or how unfair the plague felt, he would crumble. He needed a mental fortress. He called this the inner citadel. It was a place inside his mind where no enemy soldier and no backstabbing politician could ever reach. To build this citadel, Marcus practiced a technique called objective representation. This sounds like a big phrase, but it is actually very simple. It means describing things exactly as they are, without adding any flavor or judgment to them. He wanted to strip away the legend of things to see their bare bones. For example, Marcus wore a robe dyed in a very expensive color called Tyrian purple. In Rome, this robe was a symbol of ultimate status. People bowed to it, they envied it. But in his diary, Marcus reminded himself that the robe was just sheep's wool soaked in the blood of a smelly seashell. By describing it that way, the robe lost its power over him. It was just a thing. He did the same with his fancy dinners. He told himself that the roasted pig on his table was just a dead animal and the fine wine was just fermented grape juice. He wasn't trying to be a grump. He was trying to be free. He realized that we suffer because we put labels on things. We call a storm bad. We call a promotion good. We call a criticism an insult. Marcus believed that if you take away the label, the suffering disappears. If someone betrays you, the fact is, this person said words that were not true. The story you add is, this is a disaster and I am a victim. Marcus taught himself to stick to the facts and leave the story behind. The space between centuries after Marcus Aurelius died, another man named Viktor Frankl found himself in a situation that was even more horrific than a Roman war camp. Frankl was a doctor who was taken to a concentration camp during World War II. He lost everything: his family, his clothes, his research, and his freedom. He was surrounded by starvation and death every single day. While he was there, he noticed something fascinating about the people around him. Some prisoners gave up almost immediately. They lost hope and died quickly, but others managed to find a strange kind of strength. Frankl realized that even in a place where your body is owned by others, your mind can remain free. He discovered that between a stimulus, something that happens to you, and your response, what you do about it, there is a tiny space. In that space, you have the power to choose how you feel. If a guard hits you, that is the stimulus. You cannot control the guard, but in the tiny space before you react, you can choose the meaning of that event. You can choose to see yourself as a victim, or you can choose to see yourself as a person who is enduring a test of character. Frankl argued that our whole lives are lived in that tiny space. This idea became the foundation for what we now call cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT. In the 1960s, a doctor named Aaron Beck started looking at why people get depressed or anxious. He found that it wasn't usually the events in their lives that caused the most pain. It was the automatic thoughts they had about those events. If a friend doesn't text you back, your automatic thought might be, "They hate me." That thought makes you sad. But a Stoic or a student of CBT would look at the facts. The fact is, the phone has not chimed yet. There are 100 reasons why that could be true. They might be busy. Their battery might be dead. They might be asleep. By sticking to the facts, the objective representation, you stop the emotional spiral before it starts. You stay inside your inner citadel. The shove on the brown line. Marcus Reid stood on the L train in Chicago, gripping the metal pole as the brown line car lurched around a corner. It was 6:15 a.m., and the air inside the train was thick with the smell of damp coats and burnt coffee. Marcus hadn't slept well. His mind was a noisy mess of what-ifs. What if the software launch glitched again today? What if the vice president sent another one of those biting emails? What if he was just not cut out for this job? His heart was already racing, and he hadn't even reached his office yet. He felt like a thin sheet of glass that was about to crack. Suddenly, the train screeched to a halt. A man in a bulky jacket, rushing to get off at the Merchandise Mart stop, shoved Marcus hard. He didn't say, "Excuse me." He just used his shoulder to plow Marcus out of the way, nearly knocking him into the lap of an elderly woman. Marcus felt a surge of heat crawl up his neck. His fists clenched. His first thought was a roar of anger. Who does this guy think he is? I'm already having a bad day, and this jerk has to make it worse. People in this city have no respect. He wanted to shout something. He wanted to shove back. Then he caught his reflection in the dark window of the train. He looked tired. He looked small. He remembered the concept of the inner citadel he had been reading about. He realized he was letting a stranger, a man he would never see again, walk right into his mind and trash the furniture. He decided to try the stripping away technique. He took a deep breath and looked at the man again as he pushed through the doors. He took away the label jerk. He took away the story about disrespect. He looked at the facts. Fact 1, a human body moved through space and made contact with my shoulder. Fact 2, my balance was briefly lost and then regained. Fact 3, the man is moving quickly away. As Marcus watched the man on the platform, he noticed something he hadn't seen when he was angry. The man wasn't looking around with a smug face. He was staring straight ahead, his shoulders hunched, and his eyes were red and watery. He wasn't being a jerk for the sake of it. He was crying. He was clearly in the middle of his own personal storm, perhaps much worse than a software glitch. The anger in Marcus's chest didn't just fade, it vanished. By seeing the man objectively, Marcus realized the shove wasn't about him at all. It was just an event in the world. He hadn't been insulted. He had just been bumped. He felt a strange sense of relief. He had avoided a morning argument that would have ruined his entire day. For the first time in weeks, his heart rate slowed down. He had found a small piece of the space Viktor Frankl talked about. The view from the fortress building and inner citadel is not a one-time event. It is a daily practice. You have to be like a sentry at the gate of your own mind. Every time a piece of information tries to enter, you have to stop it and ask for its ID. Is this a fact, or is it an opinion? Most of the things that stress us out are actually opinions dressed up as facts. If your boss says, "This report is late," that is a fact. If you think, "This is a disaster and I'm going to get fired," that is an opinion. The fact is manageable. You can finish the report. The opinion is a monster that lives in your imagination and eats your peace of mind. Marcus Aurelius used to tell himself to wipe out the impression. He meant that we should stop the mental movies we play in our heads. We often suffer more in our imagination than we do in reality. We play out arguments that haven't happened. We mourn for things we haven't lost yet. We treat maybe like it is definitely. To master the art of inner peace, you have to become a scientist of your own life. When something happens that makes your heart race or your stomach knot, stop and describe it in the most boring way possible. Strip away the adjectives. Don't call the email rude. Call it a message with certain words. Focus on the present moment. Don't worry about what the event means for next week. What is happening right now in this second? Usually in the right now, you are actually fine. You are breathing. You are safe. Identify the legend. Are you upset because of what happened or because of what you think it says about your worth? This is how you build the walls of your citadel. You realize that your character and your mind are the only things that truly belong to you. Everything else, your reputation, your bank account, the weather, and the behavior of other people, is outside the walls. Those things can be messy. They can be chaotic, but they don't have to get inside. The architecture of quiet, think about a lighthouse during a massive storm. The waves are crashing against the base. The wind is howling so loud you can't hear yourself think. The spray of the salt water is blinding. But inside the lighthouse, there is a small room. In that room, a candle is burning steadily. The flame doesn't flicker because the walls are thick. The light stays focused on its job, regardless of how much the ocean rages outside. You are the lighthouse. Your inner citadel is that small, sturdy room. The goal of Stoicism is not to stop the storm. You can't stop the storm. The waves will always come. The goal is to build walls so strong that the flame of your reason never goes out. Marcus Aurelius didn't stop the plague. He didn't stop the war. He didn't even stop his generals from being difficult. He simply stopped letting those things define whether he was a good and peaceful man. He realized that the world can take your money, your health, and even your life, but it cannot take your ability to see things clearly unless you give it permission. We often think that we will find peace once our problems are solved. We say, "I'll be happy once this project is done," or "I'll be calm once I have more money in the bank." But that is a trap. There will always be another project. There will always be a new bill. If your peace depends on the world being quiet, you will never be at peace. The world is never quiet. The real aha moment comes when you realize that you don't need the world to change for you to feel better. You only need to change the way you represent the world to yourself. You can be like Marcus, writing your own version of meditations in the middle of your own modern war zone. Your war zone might be a cubicle, a kitchen full of screaming toddlers, or a tense board meeting. The location doesn't matter. The technique is the same. The reframe, we often treat peace like it is a destination we are trying to reach. We think of it as a quiet beach or a mountaintop where nothing bad ever happens. But that kind of peace is fragile. It breaks the moment you have to leave the beach and go back to work. The Stoic version of peace is much more powerful because it is portable. You can take it with you into a traffic jam. You can take it with you into a hospital room. You can take it with you into a confrontation with a difficult person. This is because this kind of peace is not the absence of trouble. It is the presence of a clear mind. Instead of trying to hide from the world, you learn to look at the world through a clean lens. You stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and start asking, "What is this exactly when I strip away the story?" When you do this, the monsters in your life start to look a lot like Marcus Aurelius's purple robe. They turn from terrifying giants into simple facts. A failure becomes a result I didn't expect. A betrayal becomes a person acting according to their own nature. A crisis becomes a situation that requires a decision. You are not a slave to your moods. You are not a victim of your environment. You are the architect of your own internal world. By mastering the art of objective representation, you stop being a person who reacts and start being a person who acts with purpose. The mental chatter begins to quiet down, not because the world stopped talking, but because you stopped listening to the parts that aren't true. The journey to an unshakable life starts with this single realization. The world provides the raw materials, but you are the one who decides what they mean. You have the power to stay calm in the mud of the Danube or the noise of the Chicago. The citadel is already there, inside you. You just have to start building the walls, one fact at a time. Chapter 2. Control the dividing line of S. The sun rose over Rome much like it does over any busy city today. It was a Tuesday in the late 1st century. Smoke from cooking fires drifted through the narrow, crowded streets. People shouted at their neighbors, horses stepped over trash, and the smell of roasting meat mixed with the stench of the open sewers. For a man named Epictetus, the morning started with the same heavy weight he felt every day. He was a slave. He didn't own the bed he slept on. He didn't own the clothes on his back. He didn't even own his own time. His master was a man named Epaphroditus, a powerful secretary to the Emperor Nero. Epaphroditus was a man who had everything, money, fame, and the ear of the most powerful leader in the world. But he was also a man with a cruel streak and a very short temper. Epictetus spent his days running errands, cleaning, and standing ready to serve. In the eyes of Roman law, he was not a person. He was a living tool. If his master decided to sell him, he was sold. If his master decided to beat him, he was beaten. Most people in his position spent their lives in a state of constant, shivering fear. They lived at the mercy of someone else's mood. If the master woke up happy, it was a good day. If the master woke up angry, life was a nightmare. One afternoon, for reasons history doesn't fully record, Epaphroditus became enraged with Epictetus. Perhaps a chore wasn't done fast enough. Perhaps the master was just bored. He grabbed Epictetus's leg and began to twist it. Most of us can imagine the panic that would set in. The white-hot flash of pain, the urge to scream, the desperate begging for mercy. But Epictetus did something that seemed impossible. As the bone began to groan under the pressure, he looked his master in the eye. He didn't plead. He didn't fight back. He simply gave a calm warning. "You are going to break it," he said. The master, fueled by a need to show his power, twisted harder. There was a sickening snap. The bone broke. Epictetus looked down at his ruined leg, then looked back up at the man who had done it. "Did I not tell you it would break?" he asked quietly. He didn't cry out in anger. He didn't spend the rest of his life cursing the man who made him limp. Instead, he realized something that would change the world for the next 2,000 years. His master could break his leg, but his master could not break his mind. His master could control where he went, but he could not control what Epictetus thought or how he chose to feel about the pain. In that moment of agony, the most important rule of Stoicism was born: the dichotomy of control. It is the simple, sharp line that separates a life of misery from a life of peace. The great lie of control most of us live under a giant misunderstanding. We wake up every morning believing that if we work hard enough, worry long enough, or shout loud enough, we can control the world around us. We think we can control whether our boss likes our work. We think we can control whether the traffic is clear for our commute. We think we can control whether our partner is in a good mood or whether the economy stays strong. This is the control myth. We believe that our happiness depends on these external things going our way. Because we can't actually control them, we live in a state of constant anxiety. We are like a person trying to stop the rain by yelling at the clouds. When the rain falls anyway, we feel like failures. We feel stressed. We feel like the world is out to get us. The truth is much simpler, though it can be hard to hear at first. The Stoics taught that the world is divided into two very clear piles. Things that are up to us, our opinions, our intentions, our desires, and our own actions. Things that are not up to us, the weather, the economy, the past, the traffic, and most importantly, what other people think and do. We suffer because we spend 90% of our energy trying to move things from the not up to me pile into the up to me pile. We treat a rude comment from a stranger like it's a problem we need to fix. We treat a delayed flight like a personal insult. Epictetus realized that even as a slave with a broken leg, his up to me pile was still entirely his. His master could chain his body, but no one could put a chain on his ability to choose his own character. This realization didn't just make him feel better, it made him the freest man in Rome. Eventually, he was set free, started his own school, and even emperors came to sit at his feet to learn how to be truly powerful. The boardroom stormed fast forward to a glass-walled office in Chicago. Marcus Reid sat at a long mahogany table, his palms sweating. He was a senior project manager at Nexus Finance, and right now, his world felt like it was spinning out of control. A major vendor had just pulled out of a deal that Marcus had spent 6 months building. It was Marcus's fault. The vendor's company had been bought by a competitor, but that didn't matter to his boss, a man who viewed every setback as a personal failure of his staff. "This is a disaster, Marcus," his boss shouted, pacing the room. "Do you have any idea what this does to our quarterly goals? You should have seen this coming. You should have had a backup ready weeks ago." A week ago, Marcus would have felt his heart hammer against his ribs. He would have started apologizing, his voice shaking. He would have gone home and snapped at his wife, Sarah, and then laid awake until 3:00 a.m. wondering if he was going to be fired. He would have been a slave to his boss's anger, just as Epictetus was a slave to Epaphroditus. But Marcus had been reading about the up-to-me list. As his boss continued to rant, Marcus took out his notepad. He didn't write down the insults. Instead, he drew a line down the center of the page. On the right side, he wrote, "Not up to me. The vendor's decision to leave. My boss's temper. The company's quarterly goals. What the other people in this room think of me right now." On the left side, he wrote, "Up to me. My breathing." He took a deep breath. "My next words. Finding a new vendor. Staying calm so I can actually think. The change was almost instant. The shouting in the room didn't stop, but the shouting inside Marcus's head did. He realized